Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the first in a series of 3 mini-lectures on Philip Pullman's novel, The Subtle Knife. Today we'll start out talking about Will and Lyra. Next time, we'll get to an overview of the plot structure of the novel. The Subtle Knife begins in Oxford, just as The Golden Compass did, but this is Will Perry's Oxford, not Lyra's. Will's actions and his situation are suspenseful and mysterious, but one thing quickly becomes clear. We're seeing a new and more extreme version of the child in charge motif from the first volume. Lyra, as you recall, ignored or disobeyed her adult caretaker several times, first running away from Mrs. Coulter and later disobeying Farder Coram when she takes control of the conversation with the witch consul, Dr. Lancelius. She seeks out Yorick Burnison to tell him where his armor is hidden, and goes with Yorick to find Billy Costa, always against the wishes of John Faa. But now Will is the caretaker, protecting his weak and confused mother as best he can. His two predominant traits quickly emerge. He is loving and protective of his mother, and fiercely distrustful of authority. His name is no accident. He is sheer force of will, much like Lyra's parents, but he's also a child, reacting to events rather than taking the initiative, and so he is Will Parry. In swordsmanship and in knife fighting, a parry is a defensive maneuver designed to deflect an opponent's thrust. Will, then, is a protector, not an aggressor. Incidentally, his name also echoes that of Rear Admiral Robert Peary, an American explorer who claimed to have led an expedition to the geographic North Pole in 1909. Will's first decisive action in Chapter 1 is to kill a man. We'll want to think about what this means for Will, and one of the paper topics I've thrown out is the significance of killing for masculine identity. On our syllabus, Will's deed links him to Romeo, to Pip, and to Bigger Thomas. Next time, we'll look at the way different lines of action in this volume are organized into a complicated but very symmetrical pattern. This time, though, we'll focus on the central development that runs through this pattern, the evolving relationship between Will and Lyra. All the exotic locales, the arcane weapons and devices, the strange cast of characters, the dizzying turns in the plot, the hairbreadth escapes and perils of the imminent breach, all this is wonderful, but it can distract us from the emotional and imaginative core of the story as it unfolds between two children on the threshold of puberty. They meet for the first time in the city of magpies. Will, newly arrived and exploring the eerily deserted city, enters an upstairs apartment over a bar. Just before he opens the last door in the apartment, he senses that the room on the other side of the door isn't empty. He realizes that he's now on the other side of the situation in which he accidentally killed one of the men searching his mother's apartment in Oxford. He thought how odd it was that this day had begun with someone outside a darkened room and himself waiting inside, and now the positions were reversed. And as he stood wondering, the door burst open and something came hurtling at him like a wild beast. But memory had warned him, and he wasn't standing quite close enough to be knocked over. From their first encounter, then, Will and Lyra are both oddly linked and locked in combat. This moment will occur in a third variation at the central turning point in the novel when they fight together to gain possession of the subtle knife. Lyra was scrambling toward the man from behind with the loose rope in her hand. Will darted forward suddenly, just as he'd done to the man in his house, and with the same effect. His antagonist tumbled backward unexpectedly, falling over Lyra to crash onto the lead. This moment confirms the partnership growing up between Will and Lyra. They're fighting together, not against each other. This partnership unfolds across 8 pivotal scenes, spread across the length of the novel. After their first bruising encounter, Will immediately returns to his parental role, finding food and cooking it. Lyra, lost without servants and too proud to feed or wash herself, must learn to combine independence with a dash of humility. Over their omelet and baked beans, the two begin sizing each other up. Will sees in Lyra, beneath the dirt and bruises, a kind of deep, sad wariness. While he's studying her, she is evidently studying him because she realizes that he does, in fact, have a demon, but located inside him. Later, while he sleeps, she sits beside him, and just as he discerned her sad wariness, she recognizes that his nature is savage, courteous, and unhappy. Then she consults the alethiometer, learning to her satisfaction that he has killed a man. A murderer was a worthy companion. She felt as safe with him as she'd felt with Yorick Burnison, the armored bear. She swung the shutter across the open window so the morning sunlight wouldn't strike on his face, and tiptoed out. The quietly protective gesture of closing the shutter speaks volumes about this moment. So does the reference to Yorick, for the progress of Lyra's feelings toward Will is clearly marked by a series of comparisons to the armored bear. When the alethiometer is stolen from Lyra and she wants Will to help her get it back, he doesn't respond well to her first suggestions, and she bristles. "You're stupid. Yorick Burnison would go there straight away and rip his head off. I wish he was here. He'd—" But she fell silent. Will was just looking at her, and she quailed. She would have quailed in the same way if the armored bear had looked at her like that, because there was something not unlike Yorick in Will's eyes, young as they were. Near the end of the novel, we can look ahead a little bit here, Pan tells Will, "She thinks you're the bravest fighter she ever saw, as brave as Yorick Burnison." "I suppose I better not seem to be frightened, then," Will said. He was quiet for a minute or so, and then he said, "I think Lyra's braver than me. I think she's the best friend I ever had." "She thinks that about you as well," whispered the demon. This moment, quietly intimate, has a powerful effect on Lyra, who was pretending to be asleep. The relationship that unfolds across these defining moments does not unfold evenly, and I won't try to detail every twist and turn. We can just note the milestones. One of the interesting dynamics at play is the difficulty Lyra has in taming her fierce pride. She and Will both start out protective of their secrets and unwilling to show vulnerability. They also think that their objectives are separate. Before their first trip back to Will's Oxford, he tells Lyra, "I got my own things to do in Oxford, and if you give me away, I'll kill you." She agrees. A few sentences later, he tells her, "In my world, you got to do as I say." Here, Will is asserting his authority over Lyra, but he's also revealing that he thinks his purpose is unrelated to hers. On her side, Lyra has to confront the same two issues, learning when to yield to Will and discovering that their quests are not separate. The alethiometer tells her as much. What it said was, "You must concern yourself with the boy. Your task is to help him find his father. Put your mind to that." She blinked. She was genuinely startled. Will had appeared out of nowhere in order to help her. Surely that was obvious. The idea that she had come all this way in order to help him took her breath away. At first, Lyra doesn't follow the alethiometer's instruction. Her resistance comes out as soon as she and Will rendezvous in Oxford. Evidently, she hasn't forgotten Will's imperious demand that she do as he says in his Oxford so as not to give him away. When a pair of police officers approach them on the street, their survival strategies, Will's instinct to make himself inconspicuous, Lyra's innate reliance on fluent lies, come into conflict. Lyra draws the attention of the police in order to deceive them with a lie, and then condescends to Will. "I better stay with you from now on," she went on scoldingly once they'd gone around the corner. "You ain't safe on your own." The next day, Lyra ventures back into Oxford to visit with Mary Malone and slips up, revealing to a pair of official interrogators that she knows Will. She barely escapes back to Cittagazze. You got to give it the Italian pronunciation. Cittagazze, you know? Only to discover that Sir Charles has purloined the alethiometer. Lyra's abject misery upon discovering what she has done is her version of the humiliation we've seen both Elizabeth Bennet and Tracy Lord undergo. She promised not to give Will away, and now her failure feels like a replay of her unwitting betrayal of Roger. It might be worth thinking in a little more detail about how this relationship between Will and Lyra develops. What would you identify as key moments, and how do you see the relationship unfolding? Next time, we'll get back to the mapping of the action. It's a very symmetrical structure in this novel, just as it was in The Golden Compass.